Good morning, everyone. A couple of quick show notes to start off. Yesterday, one of the videos was supposed to go to YouTube. One of them was supposed to go to Rumble. I uploaded the wrong one to YouTube just because of a file misunderstanding. It was stacked wrong, I guess. Or maybe I just transformed it wrong and moved the wrong one over, but it doesn't matter. I misnamed them, so they were confused. And then Rumble wouldn't let me upload the second video. Like Rumble wouldn't let me upload the Rumble part. So because I uploaded the first show first, so I uploaded all the same shows, and then I started to do the second show, and Rumble said, no, you can't do that. I was like, come on. So both shows got on YouTube. Today I'll try and do better. So fingers crossed for a smoother show today. Working on it. Always learning, right? There is no failure, just another lesson learned. Right, moving forward. Okay, let's get into the YouTube part of the show today, and we're talking about school closures. Doug Ford has mandated that school closures or return to online schooling be started as of now with well, his say so, and Mr. Leacey's say so, Leachy, whatever, and. That's what's happening, and it's also happening in Alberta too. They're going to do it on the 19th. I'll show you that in just a minute. But Global News is pushing back on this, and well, there's an article that we're going to go through, so I won't necessarily play this interview for you. This doctor is playing the COVID game in that she is saying, yeah, we can do targeted school closures to deal with outbreaks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's bigger questions to be asked. But this person is talking about how important it is to have kids in schools. And socially, I think that's true. But when you stack on and layer on all of the restrictions that the unions have demanded beyond school children, and then compare that to the restrictions placed on daycare workers, how can this be driven by science? I don't understand saying that it's driven by science and the best science and all this other stuff when we've got such drastically different expectations for standards in two things that are governed by the government, and the difference is markedly one has a union and the other doesn't, right? So that's interesting, isn't it? I think that's notable. So this doctor is advocating for return to in-class schooling for kids, and I say, man, it's tough to be advocating for an in-class return with all of the restrictions. It really is. It's very, when you compare to like prisons, when you compare to like young offenders, what the expectations is for them and their day-to-day stuff, because they're educated usually on site. If they're in a young offenders unit or something like that, sometimes they'll have a teacher come in and they'll have a teacher and like somebody else work with the teacher to deal with the behavioral issues that are inherent in a class set up like that. So comparing to what is run by government, why the different standards? Unions is the why. So it's interesting that this doctor is advocating for this, and I'm glad that they're speaking out, but it should be part of the conversation about how damaging it is psychologically for the kids to be constantly bombarded with messaging of unsafe, all that stuff. That's very, the kids' psyches are not, they're not ready to handle that. They should not be dealing with that. When I'm working with a kid or in my own world as a parent, I picture my job. You know those mazes, the big maze, like it's a big box, and then within the box is the maze that moves. My job is to hold the box and let the kids explore the maze. And sometimes the maze gets bigger, and sometimes the maze gets smaller, depending on the competency level of the kid. But my job is to hold the box steady, right? Their job is to navigate the box. So it keeps them in the walled garden until they're ready to get out of it, right? Until they're ready to deal with that. And what we're doing is we're throwing our kids in the deep end and saying, it's for your safety, kids. You got to get on board with this, otherwise you might die of a virus, right? Like, it seems, don't anybody mention like all of the other things that they might die of, right? Like all of the catastrophe of life, right? Like, don't cross the street, kids, without looking both ways, man. You might get hit, right? Like that's impactful, right? And don't get in a car, kids, right? Like, goodness me, there's so many things you could fearmonger about, and we're really. All of this messaging to nudge people into compliance is not helpful, right? The kids are suffering in many ways, and we'll get to that. Here is Shelby, heard through the grapevine that AHS will be shutting down all Alberta schools starting Monday, April 19th. So this virus is so deadly that schools need to be shut down, not today, but 5 days away. People need to see the insanity of the Canadian government and their gross conduct. Okay, so the thing here, people said to me, Doug Ford got ahead of the medical officers of health usurping power and just closing the schools anyway. He said it was his idea when really it was their idea, and he was trying to save face by closing the schools first, because if he didn't, they would. So this is the problem that Jason Kenney's potentially running into here, having grades 7 to 12 moved to online learning. So that hasn't been announced yet. But what has been announced is grades 7 to 12 are moving to online learning starting Monday, April 19th, with cases of COVID-19 increasing in our schools and the number of students and staff requiring quarantine rising. Alberta Education has approved a request from the Calgary Board of Education to move grades 7 to 12 students to at-home learning. Right. So they're doing in Alberta exactly what they're doing in Ontario. And the plan in Ontario, if you believe the leaked document from October, is to start in the major city centers and then disseminate outwards, right? So as the large city centers get used to it, then you bring the rest of the population into the same policies, and then you don't get a lot of resistance because the major population centers have already happened. It's a divide and conquer strategy, right? If they did it all at once, everybody would be like, no. But do it this way and you get compliance, right? Oh, and these social engineered, these social psychological experiments and what people will do are well known. It is a studied thing. This has been well known for a long time. People have exploited this in the past. Okay, advertising is popular and well known. Look at sugar in Britain, right? Like they got a mascot and they were like, hold on a second, people really like this mascot thing, right? There's a reason that brands have mascots like that, because people associate with them and relate to them, right? Rather than a candy bar or something like that. First, do no harm. Blanket school closures no longer make medical sense. This is the doctor who was interviewed or who is interviewed here. Oh wait, no, the earlier one that I was mentioning. Where here? At the beginning here. Oh my goodness me. Here, this is the interview. Here is the article. Okay. The feeling of school closures is all too familiar now that we've been here twice before. It made sense the first time as the paramedic was novel and we feared for our children's health. We later learned that it was extremely rare for children to become seriously ill from COVID-19. Life seems to return to new normal over the summer. Our children attended camps, outdoor programming, and returned to in-person learning in the fall. Things were looking up until they weren't. Cases began to climb and we were told our healthcare system was stretched. First came societal closures followed by school closures. It seemed to make sense the second time as we feared for our children were driving community spread. We've since learned that cases in schools are merely a reflection of community spread. We know that overall schools are not making this problem worse. We've acknowledged that the negative impacts of school closures, yet there seems to be a glaring disconnect between what we know and our knee-jerk response to close all schools. I can't help but wonder what it will take to change the narrative around school closures. As a society, we have prioritized industry over schools and adults over children. We've accepted that many industries will never close, and we have been able to deal with isolated outbreaks locally for brief periods. Why isn't this the case for schools? We are closing classrooms and placing students in emergency childcare facilities where they risk new exposures. I want to point out here, just really quickly, the emergency childcare situation has kids who are sitting together in a room on laptops doing online learning. Maybe. I've seen this in the States. I don't know if I've seen this in Canada, but I've heard that there are kids who are doing online school on laptops in the same room. And I thought, like, what's the difference? Unions, right? Unions are the difference. That's why. Can you imagine? But I mean, like, here's another fun fact. If an EA has been like with a classroom or an ECE in a kindergarten classroom, there was a situation in the Upper Grand District School Board where they were trying to limit the amount of contact. So they split the class in two, and the ECE was teaching one in one room, and the teacher was teaching one in another room. Now, you can't do this from a union point of view because that's now the ECE who is outside of the teachers union doing teachers' work. You can't do that. That sets precedent, right? Like past practice, right? The union or somebody will say, well, we've had this EA behaving in a teacher's capacity, supervising the kids in a teacher's capacity. Now, in the Waterloo Catholic Board, only teachers have the capacity or ability to supervise kids. Youth care workers, EAs, can't be in a classroom alone to supervise kids. In other boards, that's not true, but or that doesn't seem to be true because they do that. But it's interesting when work crosses, when because unions are very protective of their work, right? So it's very interesting to me when you've got daycare workers, people who are like ECEs, early childhood educators, working in daycares, usually with toddlers and preschool kids because they're not in schools yet, are now being tasked to look after multiple children doing online school because it's an emergency and we can't possibly put the strain on our healthcare system, because if we send these kids to school, then they might get sick, but they won't get sick in your daycare. Weird. Isn't that weird? It's weird. It's weird. Anyway, we continue to keep daycares open, but label schools as unsafe. We leave families with no choice but for their elders to look after their children. Nurses, doctors, and other allied health workers are forced to stay home, contributing to workplace shortages. I think it's fair to say that there is a better way. As long as we leave the door open for all schools to close, we will continue to find ourselves in this very situation. Sweeping school closures do not have to occur. We can continue to address school outbreaks on a school-by-school basis while simultaneously ramping up targeted interventions in hard-hit areas. It's time to trust what science is telling us, to acknowledge the negative impacts of closures on our children and families, and to implement a strategy that holds promise. When it is clear that the harms of province-wide school closures outweigh the benefits, it is time to switch gears. Switching gears is not something our leadership does very well at all. I was going to show this to you because I think it's an important piece of this. 40% of students seriously considered dropping out of university during the pandemic. These are kids who can drop out. These are kids who can say, this isn't serving my needs. This isn't meeting my expectations. I'm going to walk away from this, and maybe when things are better, try this again. An 8-year-old in a classroom that is sitting online every day for, 6 hours a day, forced to type and then go play by themselves in a park, maybe, right? If their parents let them, which is just terrible. They can't see their friends in person. They're being forced to have a very limited social life. We are forcing these kids into that situation, and they don't have the ability to choose. And when given the opportunity to choose, university students, 40% of them are choosing or considering leaving the education. Because, and I'm sure that there are other contributing factors, but this is a canary in the coal mine, something to pay attention to, bellwether, right? These are UK numbers, but you can bet Canada's are similar, says Anthony Fury. What sort of ripple effects will this phenomenon cause for various sectors in the years ahead? Really, it's going to be impactful. Okay, new lockdown. Brian Lilly's saying. And Brian Lilly, he knows. I can't say how he knows. It's imperceptible. I don't know. He's got like a third eye, or maybe just 2 ears that are listening to his wife or girlfriend's one side of the conversation. So what's happening there? Oh, well, you'll find out. I've got to go to another room. No, he's still here. Lots of speculation that the Ford Nation government in Ontario is considering a raft of new restrictions at a cabinet meeting Thursday, including a curfew. Also told that the agenda has been tightened up to try and prevent leaks on what they might discuss. The agenda. I like with detailed agendas. They're nice to read. Here are a few more things that Brian Lilly is hearing that are up for discussion at the Ford cabinet meeting tomorrow. Pushing a stay-at-home order past May 6th, fining people who go to work when they can work from home, and more enforcement powers for police. Sounds like a fun meeting. Enforcement powers for police. So are they going to start patrolling for people who are out because they're out for one of the 29 exemption reasons and not, because they want to be out, just to be out, and we're going to give them powers to investigate if the person's lying to them, right? I mean, no, that seems like an overstep to me, doesn't it? And it seems like maybe not the country that I grew up in. Yeah. Ontario border controls needed. Montreal Public Health Director says it's past time we have a national conversation on interprovincial and regional travel. That October email is looking more and more correct. Interprovincial and regional travel being restricted was on there. And again, somebody said to me yesterday, somebody sent me a message saying, hey, they're going to be tightening up the lockdown in Ontario. And I said, well, what more can they do? The schools are closed. Everything's closed, like stay-at-home order, everything's closed. What else do you want them to do? And now nobody's paying attention to this. There's a lot of people who are flouting the rules, who are going out. There's people in parks. The parks are busy. Most people aren't wearing masks. There is going to be pushback if there is more restrictions. And however, how are they going to enforce this? How indeed? I can't wait to see. And I hope that the email is wrong. I hope that the email is incorrect. I only see one way to enforce it. Is it police? Is it military? I don't know. Is it politicians standing on roadways saying, please don't go to the cottage, while Doug Ford takes off in his, blazer to go to the cottage, right? Like, it seems like it seems like the public trust has been lost. We'll talk about that in a minute. Don Martin writes about that. This is absolutely tyranny. To encourage residents to stay home and stay safe, the City of Toronto will offer a 24-hour 4K bloom cam of the blossoming of the trees in High Park. Given the current wave of COVID-19 in Toronto, amplified by variants of concern, access to areas of High Park with cherry blossom trees will not be permitted during their pre-bloom and peak bloom period, as maintaining proper physical distancing in these areas will not be permitted. It's outside. It's a park. What? This doesn't seem like a difficult thing. Trust people to do what they're going to do and give people the agency and the ability to make a choice about their own risk if they want to do it. But actually blocking off access to High Park, this is absolute tyranny. I'm sorry, everyone. You are not allowed access to see the flowers bloom, the blossom trees bloom, the cherry trees bloom this year on account of the ICU numbers because you as a society failed to keep those numbers low. And so now, as punishment, as is custom, the cherry blossoms are boarded off. You can watch on your phones. I watched a video when I was young. I watched a video of, it was in the 80s, and it was on like a projector reel. And the video was about people, like kids who lived in darkness, and they always lived in darkness. And there was one day that they could go and the sun shone and stuff. And this one girl gets locked in a closet, and she sees the sunshine like on a line on the floor, and she's very like, she's very taken by the line on the floor, but she missed out on like all of the sunshine. That's exactly the same thing that's happening. You can watch it on your phones, guys. Like, no, don't you see the cherry blossoms on your phone? You could Google image search it, but it's here also on your phone live too, right? Like, come on, what absolute like how insulting. We're the girl in the closet locked in the floor looking at the line of sunlight on the ground and like crying because it's so beautiful, missing out on the whole thing. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, but the essence of it is taking an experience and robbing somebody of it, right? And giving them something that pales in comparison and saying, isn't this good enough? Like, be thankful for it, peasant. Here's Montreal and the... I don't know how this can continue, right? I don't know how it can carry forward without being openly assaultive to people. But we're there. We're at that precipice. Okay, and the new restrictions going to be announced today will respond to being at that precipice. People aren't listening. People are tuning this out. We're at that precipice now, and that's why Ford's having this emergency meeting. That's why enforcement powers are being given to police, because people aren't listening voluntarily anymore. You have to pay attention to this. It's happening. You can't ignore a situation and hope that it goes away. This is going to impact you. Okay, moving forward. Next story. This is Montreal. This is where we're going if lockdowns get initiated in Ontario. Okay, here we go.
Fuck yeah.
This is...
Fucking love this, man. This is awesome.
Dude, this is amazing.
Call of Duty.
Oh my...
Oh yeah.
Oh. Holy shit.
So that's concerning, right? These people are police and they're chasing people down who are out after curfew. And yeah, it looks a post-apocalyptic movie, right? Ryan O'Connor says, another reason why we will keep reopening gyms throughout Ontario. Regular exercise may help protect against severe COVID, says the New York Times. There's a bunch of other publications that are talking about that too. The impacts of closing people's small businesses, the impacts of closing schools, the impacts of closing gyms, the impacts of closing restaurants, events, everything else, and telling you that just do it through your phone, just do it online. It's the same thing, is not human. It's not humane. It is not okay. It is not something that people are going to tolerate for much longer, and especially when there are people who are challenging this. With regards to, well, I'm going to show you. There's a order. Hold on, I'll find it and move it up because it's important. There's an order in Section 22 order that is being proposed, I suppose, that should be introduced before the weekend. Says CBC Ottawa. A new Section 22 order is expected before the weekend to require masks at all Ottawa city parks, per Dr. Brent Maloney, I think, from Ottawa Health. So now they're mandating that people wear masks outside of public parks, and this will be enforced by bylaw, right? And I'm sure that exemptions exist. I'm sure that there's exemptions in this, but new enforcement is coming because I think they're losing the plot. I think they're losing the plot, and I think that they're losing the trust of the public, and that's notable. It's notable to say that. It's notable to see that, but they're going to try and regain power, regain the I don't know, the narrative, but they are losing it. They are losing it. Okay, back to what I was talking about. Well, the next story. The next story is a bit of governance. And Brian Lilly says, anyone recognize this MP wandering around in the buff in their office while taking part in the hybrid parliament? Obviously, given the flag, they're from Quebec. Wonder what kind of mobile phone he uses. Yowza, right? Where's his mask? So he says. And here is, for those wondering, the MP who appeared in his simplest attire is in fact Pontiac Liberal MP William Amos. According to his pic, I was sent compared to Facebook Live of him in his office yesterday. So yeah, it was him. And Liberal MP caught stark naked during House of Commons video conference. So that was big news in Canadian politics. There was lots of private member jokes, LOL. Right? Will Amos says, I made a really unfortunate mistake today, and obviously I'm embarrassed by it. My camera was accidentally left on as I changed it into work clothes after going for a jog. I sincerely apologize to all my colleagues in the House. It was an honest mistake, and it won't happen again. Okay. Yowza, right? I don't know. Sure, going for a jog. All right. Here's this Kingston poll. This is a Kingston global news poll. It says, should Kingston area MPP Randy Hillier resign for his anti-lockdown views? And no is 89%. I was 90% when I saw it. I think that it's interesting that the news is just blatantly playing politics this way. Should he resign? You know, that's not for you guys to talk about, right? It's much more up to him to deal with than the news to be dealing with that. Canadians should assume next federal election will be under increased threat compared to 2019, Liberal minister. I thought, what does this mean? So it explains it a little bit here. I don't know that they have any kind of justification for what they're saying here, or data to back up what they're saying here. Same as in 2019. I didn't see any indication of the allegations they were making of foreign interference. In fact, I saw much more domestic interference with Antifa, etc. And I'd be interested to see who was funding Antifa, etc. Like where did their funding go, and where did their organization pop up from? But regardless, the foreign Russian bots were much less of a concern than Antifa and domestic newspapers, etc. Because they were purposely misquoting people, and it was just terrible. It was terrible. Okay, Canadians should assume that the next federal election will be under increased threat of foreign interference by malevolent actors compared to 2019, warns the minister in charge of domestic institutions. In the next general election in Canada, I think we should just assume that the threat environment and threat context has increased since our last election in the fall of 2019, Minister Dominic LeBlanc said during a virtual event on cybersecurity and election safeguards Wednesday. The briefing that we've had, and certainly what Canadian security agencies have made public, indicates that the threat environment is increasing. He added, the number of attempts to influence elections in a malicious way, the use of disinformation, and the use of cyber threat, is increasing globally, so I don't think Canada should naively think we're immune to that. LeBlanc's comments also come only days after both the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, and the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians published reports warning that of the growing threat of foreign meddling and espionage, going so far as to say that those activities have reached levels not seen since the Cold War. Again, I would love to see their evidence on that. Conservative leader, this is just kind of mishmash governance because... yeah, that's kind of, sometimes I'd split it into other things. We're going to talk about the budget in a minute, but I was talking earlier this week about a budget bill that O'Toole didn't support, but he's allowing a free vote. I don't know what that means. I don't think it'll pass. And it should pass. Like, it really should pass, but I don't think it'll pass because it's got the sex selective abortion bill, right? And that's verboten in Canadian politics. You can't bring that up, even if people are using using abortion to select the sex of their baby. That's wild. That's certainly out of step with traditional Canadian values, right? Conservative leader confirms free vote allowed on MP's selective abortion bill. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole will allow a free vote on a caucus member's bill to ban sex-selective abortions. Private member's bill on the issue was presented Wednesday by Saskatchewan MP Kathy Wagenthal and debated in the House of Commons. Wagenthal cited a survey that found many Canadians are against the deliberate termination of a pregnancy on the basis of sex. She argued her bill promotes gender equality for girls and women and has more support than other abortion-related issues while being less polarizing. I encourage every member of this House to have the courage to exercise their rightful freedom to vote their own conscience the way that we on this side of the floor have the freedom to do and pass this bill. And I believe that O'Toole was going to vote no for that. So, liberal. He's a liberal, right? A liberal in charge of the Conservative Party. What are you going to do? And you can argue that allowing the member to bring that bill forward shows he's a true conservative. But I think that if he was behind it and pushing for it and trying to get bipartisan, like building bipartisan support to pass it and using it as an election platform to prove conservatism and protecting, unborn babies from sex selective whatever. If that's what he was doing, I would say maybe different. But he's not supporting this, right? He's trying to play the fence on it. He's trying to play, riding the both sides, right? And he's trying to keep the party center while allowing the vote that he knows probably won't pass. It's going to be a blip. I'm sorry, that's just what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to pass. And that's the way it's been in Canada. That's just the way it is, right? And what are you going to do? Okay, moving to Quebec. The collapse of Quebec's representative democracy. We know that according to recent polls, more than 46% of Quebecers are exasperated with the sanitary measures. Not one sitting MNA dared to represent the interests of this popular exasperation. There are a lot of people in Quebec who are upset. I've seen more videos of people banging pots and pans. And so there are people who are upset, but what are you going to do? Right? This is Westphalian Times, so it's an opinion piece. Check it out if you're interested. Scalpers are reselling Ontario campsite permits for up to 5 times the original cost. I have family that is trying to book campsites and all of that other stuff, and bots are trying to, or as soon my mother-in-law called the camp people, and she said, listen, I'm going to try and trade this site for this site, but every time I try and do that, the site that I'm trying to go for, even if it's open, it gets sold, it gets removed. And so they tried to do it. And even the administrators of the site had their site never show up in the queue of available sites. So the administrator of the site never saw the site become available. Isn't that wild? And they'll tell you at Ontario Parks that that's not happening. But it's happening. And even the administrator, according to the secondhand story I heard, was surprised and was like, "Oh, we'll have to look into that." I don't have a lot of confidence they're going to look into that. So, it is what it is. Moving on, dear Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. This is in response to her opportunity and epiphany comment. Lori Goldstein says, "COVID-19 is not a window of political opportunity; it's a pandemic." Sometimes you just got to state the obvious, man. Here's the West Block. I thought this was interesting. 16 likes and 14 retweets on Canada's #1 Sunday political TV show. Really? 16 whole likes for this question for the whole country. Wow. It's super popular, this show. Hey, Canada, we're getting our first federal budget in more than 2 years on Monday. What's your budget wish list? Money? Let us know in the comments below. A bag of money? Sure, why not? Sure. Yeah, let us know in the comments below. Targeted funding for long-term care. That's a provincial jurisdiction there, Terry. National standards for nursing homes. Okay, setting national standards. That would probably be within in their purview. But still, there's a lot of interesting requests. Here is Pierre Poilievre, and this is building some anticipation for the coming budget. I think it's Monday, April 19th. And here's Mr. Poilievre. Here we go.
The government with the worst economic growth since the Great Depression is the one right across the aisle right now, and we're not part of that government. But this finance minister said that COVID is a time for epiphanies. Well, the Prime Minister had a strange and unusual for him epiphany in his letter to her. He said, "You will avoid creating new permanent spending in your budget. That's right in the mandate letter. So yes or no, will the finance minister honor the Prime Minister's letter and avoid all permanent new spending?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite seems afraid to embrace the idea that public investment can actually support Canadians during their time of need. I'd point him to the words of the chief economist.
So he's not going to answer the question, right? Because he's a liberal and he doesn't answer questions he doesn't like. That's what's going on. When they start answering questions like that, that means you're never going to actually hear a meaty response. You're just going to hear the prepared remarks that were written down for him. Right? Investing is not spending, really, but it kind of is. These three headlines are all from the same day. Okay, this is the Toronto Sun. Health Minister dodges questions about banning India flights. 33 flights carrying infected passengers arrived in Canada from Delhi so far in April. We're talking about new restrictions, remember. New, harder restrictions and enforcement, and people are ignoring it. And yet, Ottawa drops specific COVID-19 screening for travelers from Brazil as variant spreads throughout British Columbia. Right? Don't worry about it. Just come on in. Don't worry about it. We're going to lock you down in BC too. Trudeau says he supports restricting interprovincial travel when necessary to stem the spread of COVID-19. This is against our basic charter rights. This is against freedom of movement within the country that we live, right? Banning interprovincial travel is a slippery slope to banning intercity travel for COVID, for your protection, comrade, right? And it is coming, and I hope I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like I'm wrong, but I hope I'm wrong, okay? It's very concerning what is happening. This is a rare sight in Greater Toronto these days. Huff Boxing Gym, located in Mississauga, Ontario, has decided that they are going to open their doors to their fitness facility despite the current COVID-19 restrictions. Full story to come. So Rebel News is doing a story on that. And now we're going to get into the stuff that I'm not going to put on YouTube. I hope that I don't get a strike or anything like that for the shows yesterday. I don't think it was too crazy, but I'm just trying to hedge my bets. Like, I'm just trying to talk about the COVID-y stuff in the other show. And I know I talked a lot about the COVID stuff, but there's more of that to come, talking in the next show on Rumble. And I'm going to upload both, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it today because yesterday was such an epic failure. It did not work. So I'm going to upload the second show first on Rumble. So the first show's here, second show's there, and I'll upload the other ones later, just so there's no errors and stuff because it really messed up yesterday and it was not great. So that's the plan for today. I'm still looking at merging the two shows and just uploading that onto Rumble, but I'm not there yet. Yeah, so thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to continue watching, check it out on Rumble for sure, probably, fingers crossed. I'm going to go name this file right now and then reset. So thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Greg and I recorded one yesterday, but the sound levels were kind of weird, so sorry about that. But it was still a good conversation, and I think it's worthwhile. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.